A wealthy businessman discovers his hired chauffeur moving rhythmically with his wheelchair-bound child. His reaction exposes buried prejudice. Still, the truth behind this stranger will rewrite everything he believed about family, loss, and second chances. End this right now! Marcus Wellington's command cut through the elegant space like a blade. Standing rigid at the threshold, fists white-knuckled, he witnessed something that ignited instant fury within him. His daughter Emma, age 8, sat centered in her mobility chair, radiating genuine happiness, the first authentic joy in half a year. Beside her stood David Torres, the recently hired transportation specialist, only 3 weeks into employment, swaying gracefully to Latin rhythms streaming from his mobile device. The 32-year-old gently clasped the child's palm, rotating slowly while she applauded with delight Marcus hadn't witnessed since that devastating collision. "What gives you permission to touch my child?" Marcus stormed forward, as David immediately ceased movement and released Emma's fingers. Her radiant expression dissolved, replaced by bewilderment and alarm. David maintained composure, palms extended peacefully. "Sir, allow me to clarify." "Clarify what?" Marcus interrupted, voice dripping contempt. "Your contract specified transportation duties. Nothing resembling this spectacle." He gestured aggressively toward the still-playing device. Silence that immediately. Emma began weeping quietly while David swiftly grabbed the phone, pausing the melody. The resulting stillness felt suffocating. Marcus glanced between his daughter and David, experiencing an inexplicable tightness radiating through his chest. "Father, please," Emma whispered, voice fractured and small. "David was simply showing me how to move like other children." "Movement isn't possible for you," Marcus erupted, words escaping before conscious control engaged. "You're chair-dependent, Emma. Accepting reality sooner makes everything easier." David's expression flickered briefly, yet he remained quiet. Something resided in his gaze, neither rage nor terror, but profound comprehension Marcus couldn't identify. As if this driver intimately understood the exact pain driving such reactions. "Mr. Wellington," David stated calmly, voice carrying subtle inflections Marcus had previously overlooked. "May we converse privately?" "Nothing requires discussion," Marcus responded sharply. "Collect your belongings." "You're terminated." David nodded deliberately, but before departing he locked eyes with Emma once more. "Remember our conversation about moths, little one? Some navigate differently, yet they still reach the light." As David moved toward the exit, Marcus noticed something unsettling. The man displayed neither shock nor desperation emotions expected from sudden unemployment. A tranquility permeated his movements, suggesting knowledge Marcus lacked. Emma continued crying while Marcus knelt beside her chair, attempting to comfort her. His words rang hollow even to himself. "Why did you dismiss him?" Emma asked between sobs. "He restored my sense of normality." Marcus had no adequate response. Throughout 6 months since the collision left Emma paralyzed below the waist, he'd hired premium physical rehabilitation experts, mental health professionals, and medical specialists that money could secure. None had extracted genuine smiles from his daughter until David's arrival. Watching Emma wipe tears with her hand, Marcus questioned whether he'd committed a catastrophic error. Something about that driver felt incongruent, triggering warning signals in his analytical consciousness, but not the anticipated kind. If this narrative exploring prejudice and unexpected revelations resonates with you, subscribe, because what Marcus was about to uncover regarding David would transform not merely his perspective on the driver, but fundamentally alter his self-understanding in ways he never imagined possible. 3 days had elapsed since the termination, and the Wellington residence seemed restored to its customary quiet, sterile rhythm. Marcus immersed himself in professional obligations, convincing himself he'd acted appropriately. After all, permitting strangers to exploit his daughter's fragility couldn't be tolerated, but Emma refused cooperation with his normality blueprint. The child wouldn't exit her bedroom, rejected meals, and cried whenever automotive sounds reached the driveway, hoping David had returned. Physical rehabilitation specialists reported complete resistance. She simply declined participation in any therapeutic activity. "Father, when will David return?" Emma asked for perhaps the 10th time that morning, tears staining her pillowcase. "We've discussed this repeatedly, sweetheart." "He wasn't suitable for our household," Marcus replied, adjusting his necktie before the mirror. The conference with Asian investors couldn't be rescheduled despite domestic turmoil. But he comprehended me, Emma murmured, rotating toward the wall. Meanwhile, across the metropolitan area, David Torres sat at his modest kitchen table, calmly typing on computing equipment definitively mismatched with the humble apartment he occupied. The screen displayed email sequences in English, Spanish, and Portuguese correspondence that no simple driver should manage. His phone chimed. Dr. Torres, the voice spoke in Spanish. The university requests confirmation regarding your neuroplasticity lecture next week. I need postponement for several days, David answered in matching language, eyes never leaving the photograph he'd discreetly captured of Emma during one movement session. I have a particular case requiring attention. Marcus had never bothered to thoroughly investigate David Torres's credentials. Had he done so, he would have discovered the man hired as his chauffeur possessed a doctorate in neuroscience from Salamanca, specialized in music movement therapy for children experiencing neurological trauma, and had abandoned a promising academic trajectory in Madrid following personal catastrophe. But something else existed, something even exhaustive investigation wouldn't reveal. David had known the Wellington family far longer than Marcus imagined. As Marcus prepared for another day, attempting to ignore his daughter's distress, his executive assistant, Robert, entered the office wearing a concerned expression. Mr. Wellington, I must report something peculiar, Robert stated, consulting his tablet. The driver you terminated, he didn't contest dismissal, he didn't request references. He seemed completely untroubled, Marcus frowned. Indeed, David's serene reaction had disturbed him initially. So what? Perhaps he'd already secured alternative employment. Except I conducted some investigation, sir. I discovered he possesses advanced academic credentials. He speaks 4 languages. And Robert hesitated. Records show him working with special needs children in European medical facilities. Marcus's stomach contracted slightly. Why wasn't I informed previously? Because you didn't request comprehensive background verification. You said you simply needed someone for transportation. Marcus vaguely recalled the hiring interview. David had been recommended by the employment agency as highly qualified and experienced with families. He'd assumed that referred exclusively to driving experience. That afternoon, Marcus returned home early and found Emma exactly as he'd left her, motionless on the bed, staring through the window, but this time she was whispering something. Who are you addressing, sweetheart? He asked, approaching. The moths, Emma replied without turning. David taught me some navigate differently, yet they still reached the light. Like me, Marcus felt chest constriction. Those were David's final words to Emma before departure. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, Marcus found himself walking to the garage, where he typically found David cleaning the vehicle and humming softly. The space now sat empty and silent, but something captured his attention. On the vehicle seat, David had left a small leather portfolio. Marcus opened it, expecting personal documentation. Instead, he discovered medical research on childhood paralysis, music therapy methodologies, and handwritten notes labeled SPK Emma Wellington's initials. The notes were detailed, professional, revealing knowledge of Emma's condition far exceeding what any driver should possess. Exercise diagrams existed, adapted musical progressions, and a treatment protocol spanning months. At the portfolio's bottom, Marcus found a faded photograph. A young man in a white coat standing beside a blonde woman in a hospital bed, both smiling at the camera. The woman had Emma's identical blue eyes. It was his wife, Catherine, the woman who died in the collision that left Emma paralyzed. The photo was dated 6 years earlier at a hospital in Madrid. On the reverse, a note in Spanish. Dr. David Torres, pediatric neurological trauma specialist, treatment of Catherine Wellington. Marcus dropped the photograph, hands trembling. David wasn't simply a skilled driver who'd coincidentally appeared in his life. He'd known Catherine. He'd treated his wife. And now, 6 years later, he'd mysteriously materialized to work in his house precisely when Emma needed assistance most. Every humiliation Marcus had inflicted on David, every harsh word, every contemptuous glance, now carried a completely different weight. The man he'd terminated so cruelly wasn't an opportunist exploiting a vulnerable child. He was possibly the only person worldwide who genuinely knew how to help Emma, and Marcus had just dismissed him. The next morning, Marcus couldn't concentrate on any conferences. The photograph of Catherine with David hammered in his mind like an unanswered riddle. How was it possible that fate had delivered his wife's physician to work as a driver in his home precisely when Emma needed him most? It couldn't be coincidental. Marcus canceled all appointments and instructed Robert to hire a private investigation firm immediately. I want everything on David Torres. Every document, every position, every breath he's taken in 15 years. Sir, may I ask why this is so urgent? Robert asked, adjusting his glasses nervously. I discovered our former driver isn't who we thought, Marcus replied, still holding the photograph. And I need to know exactly who I've been dealing with. Meanwhile, Emma had taken a turn for the worse. She refused food, wouldn't communicate with anyone, and had developed a low fever that doctors couldn't explain. The physical therapist reported the girl had simply closed her eyes during the entire session, as if she'd surrendered completely. It's as if she's lost the will to exist, murmured Dr. Harrison, the family pediatrician, after examining Emma. Sometimes children who suffered trauma develop very specific emotional connections. When those connections are abruptly severed, are you suggesting my daughter is ill because I fired a driver? Marcus interrupted, voice heavy with disbelief and irritation. I'm suggesting you may have underestimated this person's importance in her recovery. That afternoon, the agency's report arrived via encrypted email. Marcus locked himself in his office and began reading, his certainties crumbling page by page. David Torres had graduated from São Paulo University with a medical degree, specialized in pediatric neurology in Spain, and for 6 years had worked at the Niño Jesus Hospital in Madrid, the same hospital where Catherine had been treated during a research assignment. But there was more, much more. David had lost his own daughter in a vehicular collision 3 years ago. Sofia Torres, aged 5, had died in circumstances similar to those that left Emma paralyzed. After the tragedy, David abandoned traditional medicine and began developing unconventional therapy techniques through music and movement for traumatized children. The report included scientific articles published by David citations in international medical journals and something that made Marcus's blood run cold. An interview he'd given to a Spanish newspaper 2 years earlier in which David mentioned his intention to find other children like Sofia and offer them a second chance to smile. Marcus picked up the phone and dialed David's number. The phone rang several times before a calm voice answered. I know you discovered who I am, David said without waiting for a greeting. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Marcus asked, voice betraying a mixture of anger and confusion. Because men like you don't hire former physicians to drive vehicles, you hire chauffeurs. And Emma needed someone who could be around her without raising suspicion or expectations. Suspicions? What kind of game are you playing with my family? David sighed deeply on the other end. Mr. Wellington, your wife Catherine, came to me 6 months before the collision. She was researching alternative treatments for childhood paralysis because doctors had already diagnosed a problem during her pregnancy that could affect Emma in the future. Marcus felt as if the floor had vanished beneath his feet. That's impossible. Emma was born perfectly healthy. She was. But Catherine knew there was a genetic risk. She was preparing a preventive treatment protocol in case something happened. She asked me to promise that if Emma ever needed it, I would do everything in my power to help her. David's words echoed in the silent office, like a confession that rewrote the entire history Marcus thought he knew. Catherine had kept a medical secret from him. She had prepared for a tragedy that hadn't yet occurred. You're lying, Marcus muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. It's in her will, Mr. Wellington. In the part that your attorneys probably classified as delusions of a worried pregnant woman, Catherine left specific instructions on how Emma should be treated in the event of paralysis. Marcus quickly opened the digital files of Catherine's will on his computer. They're on page 17, a section he had completely overlooked. In the event of neurological trauma or paralysis involving our daughter Emma, I recommend contacting Dr. David Torres, specialist in unconventional therapy. His methods may seem unorthodox, but they work where traditional medicine fails. My God, Marcus whispered, dropping the phone. Robert appeared at the door at that moment, carrying a folder of documents. Sir, there's something you need to see. I found records of payments your wife made to a clinic in Madrid. Monthly payments that continued to be automatically debited from a joint account until last month. Marcus took the documents with trembling hands. Catherine had been paying for a children's rehabilitation clinic all these years. A clinic where David worked as a consultant. He's been watching us, Marcus muttered. Waiting. Not watching, sir, Robert corrected gently. Waiting to be needed. At that moment, Marcus realized the extent of his arrogance. He had humiliatingly fired the only man worldwide his wife had specifically chosen to care for, Emma. He had treated as an opportunist the doctor who had abandoned a brilliant career to fulfill a promise made to a deceased woman. Worse, he had done so in front of Emma, shattering the only genuine connection the girl had formed since the collision. Marcus called David again. "I need you to come back." "That's not how it works," David replied calmly. "I'm not an employee you can fire and rehire at your convenience. I'm a doctor who made a promise. Then what do you want from me?" "I want you to stop trying to control your daughter's healing and start participating in it. I want you to admit that you don't know what's best for Emma, and I want you to apologize not to me, but to her." Marcus swallowed his pride like a bitter pill. "And if I do that? Then maybe Emma still has a chance at happiness." As Marcus processed the magnitude of his mistakes, a notification popped up on his phone. A text message from an unknown number. "Emma asked me to send this to you." It was a 3-minute video. In the video, Emma appeared sitting in her wheelchair in what looked like a doctor's office, smiling as she moved her arms in sync with soft music. Her legs, though immobile, swayed slightly to the rhythm. David appeared briefly in the corner of the screen, guiding her movements with infinite patience. The message accompanying the video was devastating in its simplicity. "She recorded this last week when she still believed that you loved her more than your own pride." Marcus realized at that moment that he had lost much more than an employee. He had lost his own daughter's trust. And now, for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he could ever regain what he had destroyed with his arrogance and prejudice. But as he watched the video for the 5th time in a row, a different determination began to grow in his chest. Not the determination to control, but the humility to learn. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to become the father Emma deserved to have. Across town, David hung up the phone and looked at the framed photo on his desk. Sophia, his daughter, smiling in a rocking chair shortly before the collision. "One more, my little one," he whispered. "We'll save one more." Marcus drove to David's apartment unannounced, the investigation report folded in his trembling hand. He found him sitting on the balcony reading a book in Spanish as if he had been expecting this visit. "You planned all of this," Marcus said bluntly, climbing the steps leading up to the small apartment. "From day one." David calmly closed the book and gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit down, Mr. Wellington. It's time we talked like two men who love the same child." "No," Marcus exploded. "You lied about who you were. You manipulated my family. You used my wife's memory to fulfill a promise I made to her," David interrupted, voice firm. "A promise you never knew she asked me to make." Marcus threw the report on the table between them. "I know everything about Sophia, your daughter. About how you abandoned medicine after she died. About how you've been using other children to try to make up for your own loss." David's face twitched slightly, but he didn't deny it. "You're right about one thing. Every child I help brings Sophia back for a few moments. But if you think that diminishes my love for Emma, you're very much mistaken." "How dare you?" Marcus began, but David interrupted him again. "Your wife came to me because she knew you would never accept unconventional methods. Catherine knew your need to control everything, to have scientific answers to emotional problems. She asked me to promise that if anything happened to Emma, I would find a way to be there, even if it meant lying about who I really was." David picked up a yellowed letter from the table. "Catherine wrote this for you, but she asked me to give it to you only when the time came." Marcus immediately recognized his wife's handwriting. With trembling hands, he opened the letter and read aloud. "Marcus, if David is giving you this letter, it means that our daughter needs him, and you are fighting it. Stop trying to fix Emma and start loving her for who she is. Let David help her. He lost his own daughter, but he can save ours." Tears began to roll down Marcus's cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning?" "Because you weren't ready to hear it. You needed to see Emma smile again first, to understand that not everything can be controlled or bought." At that moment, Marcus's phone rang. It was Sarah, the nurse, and her voice was filled with panic. "Mr. Wellington, you need to come home immediately. Emma, she's out of bed. She's trying to walk on her own and refuses to stop until David returns." Marcus felt his world collapse for the second time that month. "I'm going home," he said to David. "You're coming with me." "Not as your employee," David replied firmly. "As your daughter's doctor, as the man your wife chose to care for her, and as someone who will no longer accept being treated as inferior for trying to save your family." On the way back, Marcus finally asked the question that had been hammering in his head. What do you really want from me? I want you to stop seeing my ethnicity before you see my competence. I want you to stop thinking that because I'm Latino and I was driving your vehicle, I can't be qualified to care for your daughter. And I want you to admit that you spent 6 months paying the best specialists worldwide. But you fired the only one who really worked because he didn't look like what you expected a doctor to look like. David's words cut deeper than any investigation report. Marcus realized that he had judged David not only as an employee, but had carried all the prejudices he didn't even know he possessed. When they arrived at the mansion, they found Emma in the hallway, leaning on her wheelchair, but with her feet on the floor, trying to take small steps. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't stop. Emma, Marcus ran toward her, but she raised her hand. No, Father, I have to show David that I did it. I have to show him that I didn't give up. David approached slowly and knelt to the girl's height. I always knew you could do it, little moth. But you don't have to hurt yourself to prove it to me. Will you come back? Emma asked, her voice small and full of hope. David looked at Marcus, who finally understood that this wasn't about hiring an employee. It was about accepting help. It was about swallowing his pride. It was about admitting that he had judged an extraordinary man by his most superficial characteristics. David, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I don't know how to apologize for what I did. I don't know how to make up for my prejudice, my arrogance. But if there's still a chance, I'd like you to come back. Not as a driver. As the doctor my wife chose as the person who made my daughter smile again. David smiled for the first time since he had been fired. Only if you promise me one thing. Anything. The next time I teach Emma to move, you'll move with her, too. Because she needs her father, not just her doctor, and there in the hallway of that mansion that had been cold and silent for so long, the most beautiful transformation began, that of a family. Learning that love knows no prejudice, and that sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply accepting help from those who are willing to offer it regardless of what they look like or where they come from. 2 years later, the Wellington Mansion had been completely transformed. The Different Moths Project served dozens of children with disabilities, created through a partnership between Marcus Wellington and Dr. David Torres. Emma, now 10 years old, walked with crutches and moved regularly. Her laughter echoed through the halls of the house that had been transformed into a center of hope. Father, today we're going to teach the new girl how to move, Emma announced as she entered the office. She's afraid, but I'll show her that moving in a chair is beautiful too. Marcus smiled, remembering when he thought someone in a wheelchair couldn't move rhythmically. David had become much more than a doctor. He was the brother Marcus never knew he needed. During meetings with investors, Marcus made a point of telling the truth. I almost destroyed my daughter's only chance at happiness because I judged an extraordinary doctor by his ethnicity. My prejudice almost cost Emma her happiness. The graduation ceremony for the first class took place in the main hall. 23 children had completed the program. Emma took the stage with her crutches and performed a routine she had choreographed herself. 2 years ago, I thought I would never be happy, she said into the microphone. Today, I know that being different doesn't mean you're less special. It means you navigate in your own unique way. David watched, moved, remembering his first words to Emma. Some moths navigate differently. Yet, they still reached the light. Marcus had lost friends from his elite circle who did not accept his partnership with a Latino man, but he gained a real family and a purpose in life. I learned that prejudice is not just injustice against others. It's a prison we build for ourselves, he said in a national interview. When I finally saw David for who he really was, I didn't just save my daughter, I saved myself. The project served 300 families annually. David published his methodology free of charge for doctors worldwide. Marcus discovered that building lives was more rewarding than building fortunes. The mansion that had been a silent tomb now pulsed with music and hope. Marcus proved that the best revenge against prejudice is to turn it into bridges to a better world. If this story has shown you how our judgments can blind us to miracles right in front of us, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove human greatness has no ethnicity or social status.